Picture this. A young barista just trying to make ends meet gasps as a tray of specialty drinks crashes to the floor. Looming over her are two hulking college athletes in Letterman jackets, laughing as one of them grabs a handful of her dark hair, wrenching her head backward. And the person who commanded this brutality? A meticulously dressed woman in a cream designer pantsuit, smirking like she'd just won the lottery. This is a story about the moment supreme arrogance collided with ultimate authority, and the consequence was immediate, catastrophic justice. But before we reveal how this nightmare concludes, hit that subscribe button. Stories like this about bullies getting exactly what they deserve are what we do here at the Bully Tales, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The Riverside Café on the outskirts of Fairview was supposed to be Maya's second chance. At 21, wearing her grandmother's delicate silver necklace tucked beneath her work shirt and a determined expression that masked deep-seated anxiety, she viewed the exposed brick walls, the polished concrete floors, and the gleaming espresso machines as her pathway to independence. The uniform, a simple black button-down with dark jeans and a burgundy apron, felt like armor for a new identity, a self-sufficient woman. She desperately needed this position. The university tuition payments were approaching, dark storm clouds gathering on her financial horizon, and the tips she watched other baristas pocket sounded like liberation. Maya was reserved, perceptive, with a smile that bloomed naturally for familiar faces but withered under scrutiny. She was mastering the choreography of the afternoon rush, the ballet of steaming milk pitchers, the vocabulary of double-shot macchiatos, and oat milk flat whites. Today the cafe was humming with its typical afternoon energy, the gentle clink of ceramic cups, the rhythmic hiss of steam wands, the soft murmur of laptops clicking and quiet conversations beneath. Pendant lighting casting warm glows on reclaimed wood tables. The door chimed with a pleasant tone that completely contradicted what it announced. In swept Victoria Hastings. She was a woman who inhabited spaces as though appraising them for acquisition. Her piercing green eyes sweeping, evaluating, and dismissing everything they encountered. Her auburn hair was styled in a severe, immaculate bob, not a single strand escaping its precision. Her cream pantsuit was clearly expensive, a deliberate statement of cultivated sophistication, and it coordinated perfectly with the patent leather on her pristine heels, which clicked an impatient tempo on the polished floor as she carried her designer handbag like a scepter. Following her, like two mismatched sentinels, strode Marcus and Tyler, her nephew and his teammate. Their navy and gold Letterman jackets emblazoned with a fierce eagle for Fairview University Falcons seemed to magnify their already imposing physiques. They wore the smug, detached expressions of young men who assumed their athletic prominence granted them minor celebrity status in this college town. "We'll take the corner table, the one near the window, and I expect it sanitized properly." With antibacterial spray, Victoria declared to the cafe at large, her voice slicing through the ambient noise like a scalpel. Maya, positioned nearest the entrance, rushed to accommodate, her pulse beginning a subtle, anxious percussion against her chest. She hurried forward, wiping the already spotless marble-top table with a fresh cloth, adjusting the succulent centerpiece and sugar caddy precisely. "Your menus," Maya offered, her tone courteous but quiet, placing them carefully on the surface. Victoria didn't acknowledge her existence. "I don't require a menu. I'll have a kale and quinoa bowl with the dressing on the side, not drizzled on the bowl, in a separate container. And the almonds must be toasted, not raw. If they're raw, I'm sending it back. The chickpeas must be roasted, not canned, and definitely not that mushy prepared garbage, and the vegetables julienned, not chopped." She finally raised her gaze, her eyes arctic. "Is your pen recording all of that? Or are you depending on your apparently insufficient memory?" Maya's face flushed crimson. She'd been writing frantically. "I have it, ma'am." "Good. For the boys," Victoria continued, gesturing dismissively with a flick of her manicured fingers. "2 club sandwiches, everything on them. Extra bacon, side of sweet potato fries, and cold brew coffees with oat milk. Large." Marcus and Tyler collapsed into their chairs, already chuckling at something on Marcus's phone, their size making the furniture groan in complaint. The order was a minefield, and Maya recognized it. The kitchen was overwhelmed, tickets were accumulating, and the cook, a veteran woman named Sophia, was in no mood for customizations. She relayed the order, wincing as Sophia muttered a complaint about quinoa bowl dictators. When the food finally emerged, Maya's hands trembled slightly as she arranged everything on the large serving tray. She maneuvered through the crowded space with focused concentration, the weight of the meals feeling metaphorical, a burden of this woman's sheer, undiluted entitlement. She approached the table, her smile strained but professional. "Here we are," she announced, lowering the tray onto the stand adjacent to the table. She served the young men first, positioning the massive, aromatic sandwiches before them. They didn't acknowledge her presence, already attacking the food with both hands. Then, carefully, she moved to place Victoria's elaborate bowl in front of her. This was the instant destiny chose to interfere, or perhaps to spring a trap. As she leaned forward, Tyler, shoving a handful of fries into his mouth, decided to stretch his arms. His elbow, thick and muscular, shot outward and connected directly with Maya's wrist. It wasn't a gentle bump. It was a jarring, destabilizing impact. The beautiful, meticulously arranged quinoa bowl, the small container of dressing, the perfectly julienned vegetables launched from the dish. It arced through the air in what felt like slow motion, kale, chickpeas, and almonds, before landing with a wet, humiliating splat directly across Victoria Hastings's lap. The cream pantsuit was instantly decorated with tahini dressing, crumbled feta, and a slick of olive oil dripping onto her leather chair. The cafe didn't merely quiet. It plunged into a void of absolute silence. Every sound, every conversation, every laptop keystroke, every hiss from the espresso machine seemed to be vacuumed from the space. All that remained was the terrible dripping sound from Victoria's lap and the sharp, mortified gasp from Maya, whose hands flew to cover her mouth. Victoria stared down at her destroyed outfit. She didn't yell. She didn't shriek. A chilling, serene coldness descended over her features like a mask. She looked up at Maya, who was stammering uncontrollably. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. He hit my arm. It was an accident. I'm so sorry. I'll get towels right away." "You," Victoria said, her voice a low, controlled wire of absolute malice. "Clumsy, incompetent little fool." She rose to her feet, allowing the ruined bowl to tumble to the floor with a splash. "This suit is Armani. It costs more than you'll earn in 4 months of spilling drinks and stumbling over your own inadequacy. It was an accident, ma'am. Please, I'll pay for the dry cleaning." Maya's words tumbled out in a rush, tears of panic and humiliation welling in her eyes. "Dry cleaning?" Victoria released a short, harsh laugh. "You think this is about cleaning? This is about accountability. This is about consequences." She turned her head, her eyes finding her nephew and his companion. Her voice transformed, became horrifyingly casual, like a mother asking her sons to handle a trivial errand. "Marcus, Tyler, this little nobody needs to understand her place. Teach her." For a heartbeat, the young men appeared confused, their mouths full of sandwich. Then Marcus's face split into a slow, comprehending grin. This was sport, sanctioned sport. He and Tyler exchanged a look, a wordless communication forged through years of shared privilege and arrogance. They pushed back from the table, their Letterman jackets making them resemble uniformed enforcers. "No, please," Maya whispered, retreating, her shoe sliding on the spilled food. "I said I'm sorry." The other customers were paralyzed. A businessman at a nearby table gripped his coffee cup, his knuckles blanched white, but he remained frozen. A couple at a corner booth pulled their laptop closer, staring intently at their screens. The paralysis of witnesses, the shocking audacity of the command, had cast a spell of inaction over everyone present. Marcus reached her first. He didn't strike her with a fist. He didn't shove her violently. With a contemptuous sneer, his hand lashed out and seized the braid that fell down her back. He yanked it viciously, pulling her head backward, forcing a cry of pain and shock from her lips. Tyler, laughing cruelly, positioned himself beside her and grabbed her arm, twisting it behind her back. They weren't delivering knockout blows. They were administering humiliation, a public degradation commanded by their empress. Maya crumpled, cowering, attempting to shield her face with her free hand, sobs of terror and shame racking her body as they manhandled her over the mess on the polished floor. Victoria observed, arms folded across her chest, a satisfied gleam in her cold eyes. This was justice in her twisted universe. This was how equilibrium was restored. If you're loving this story of justice being served, make sure you're subscribed to the Bully Tales. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because we bring you the most satisfying karma stories on the platform. You definitely don't want to miss what happens next. And then the door chimed a guy in. This time the sound was a punctuation mark, an interruption of fate. Every eye, magnetized by the horrifying spectacle, flickered toward the entrance. Standing there, having just witnessed the entire despicable scene, was an elderly woman. She possessed a quiet, commanding presence, a face marked with the lines of profound wisdom and decades of judgment. Her silver-gray hair was swept back elegantly, and she wore a full, formal black judicial robe, as if she'd stepped directly from a courtroom. It was as though someone had frozen the universe mid-frame. The federal judge, whose name was Margaret Sullivan, had arrived from a naturalization ceremony at the nearby federal courthouse. She'd wanted a quiet latte and a moment of peace before returning to her chambers to review complex legal briefs. She was a woman who had dedicated 35 years to the federal bench, presiding over organized crime trials, civil rights violations, and contentious class action lawsuits. She possessed a well-documented, almost legendary contempt for those who abused power. She believed the law existed as a shield for the vulnerable, not a sword for the privileged. And what she witnessed in that cafe was a perfect, grotesque distillation of everything she despised. She didn't shout. She didn't charge forward. She simply stepped fully inside, allowing the door to close behind her with a definitive click. The gravity of her presence was immense, a shockwave of authority that shattered the bystander paralysis. Victoria's smug expression wavered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. Who was this elderly woman in ceremonial robes? Marcus and Tyler, sensing a profound shift in the atmosphere, loosened their grip on Maya, who collapsed to her knees on the filthy floor, weeping uncontrollably. Judge Sullivan advanced, her steps deliberate and measured on the concrete surface. The sound of her formal shoes was the only sound in the room. She stopped several feet from Victoria, her gaze moving methodically from her furious face to her sneering nephew to the devastated young woman on the floor. Her expression was calm, analytical, and utterly terrifying in its absence of emotion. It was the cold, assessing stare of a woman who wielded the power of the United States federal court in her hands. "Release her immediately," she stated. Her voice was not raised, but it resonated deeply, authoritatively, the voice of someone accustomed to absolute obedience in the most solemn chambers of justice. Marcus, emboldened by his jacket and the lingering adrenaline of cruelty, puffed up his chest. "Who are you supposed to be, old lady? Is there a costume party somewhere?" Judge Sullivan ignored him completely. She looked directly at Victoria. "You will order them to release her this instant." Victoria recovered her voice, shrill and piercing with indignant rage. "How dare you interfere? This incompetent little wretch destroyed a $3,000 suit. She received exactly what she earned. This is none of your concern, you senile old busybody. Mind your own business." A faint, almost imperceptible tightening occurred around the judge's mouth. She reached into the inner pocket of her robe with deliberate slowness. The entire cafe held its collective breath. She withdrew not a weapon, but a small leather credential holder. She opened it with precision, holding it aloft so Victoria, and then the two young men, could see it clearly. The gold-embossed seal of the United States Federal Court gleamed under the cafe's warm lighting. Beside it was her official photograph and identification card. "I am Senior United States District Judge Margaret Sullivan," she announced, her voice now filling every corner of the hushed space. "And as of this precise moment, it is very much my business." The color drained from Victoria's face so completely and rapidly, it appeared as though someone had pulled a plug. The cream of her suit now mocked her pallor. Marcus and Tyler's bravado evaporated like steam. Their hands fell away from Maya, as if she'd become electrified. The Letterman jackets suddenly looked like children's costumes, dress-up clothes for boys playing at being men. Judge Sullivan didn't pause. She knelt down with careful effort beside Maya, helping her to her feet with gentle hands on her elbows. "Are you injured, young woman?" she asked, her voice softening only for Maya's benefit. Maya, trembling violently, could only nod, then shake her head, completely overwhelmed by shock. "Please go behind the counter," the judge instructed gently. "Someone call the police immediately." Maya stumbled away, and the cafe manager, finally breaking from his stupor, rushed to assist her, phone already in his shaking hand. The judge then pivoted back to face the trio. She was no longer merely a woman. She was the physical embodiment of the law itself. "You too," she directed at Marcus and Tyler. "Sit at that table. Do not move a single muscle." They scrambled to comply, dropping into the nearest chairs with none of their earlier swagger, replaced by the terrified stillness of cornered animals. She then focused the full weight of her attention on Victoria. "Your full legal name," she commanded. Victoria sputtered incoherently. "You have no authority to. Your complete legal name," she repeated, the tone leaving absolutely no room for debate or defiance. It was the voice that had commanded mafia dons and corrupt politicians. Victoria Elizabeth Hastings," she whispered, the fight draining from her completely. "Miss Hastings," the judge began, and what followed was not a lecture. It was a verbal sentencing, delivered with the precision and devastating impact of a gavel strike. "What I have personally witnessed here was not a simple accident or a customer dispute. It was conspiracy to commit assault and battery. It was solicitation of violence. You, as an adult with full legal capacity, intentionally and explicitly ordered two individuals to inflict physical harm and severe psychological trauma upon a young woman engaged in lawful employment. You did so under the grotesque and illegal justification of property damage, a civil matter you sought to criminally redress through violence and intimidation." She took one measured step closer, and Victoria shrank backward against the wall. "You are not a judge. You are not a jury. You are not an executioner. Yet you appointed yourself as all three and carried out a punishment of humiliation and pain. In my courtroom, individuals who believe themselves above the law, who believe their wealth or their rage grants them authority over the bodies and dignity of others, learn a very difficult, very permanent lesson." She then directed her gaze at the two young men attempting to disappear into their chairs. "And you too. You wear the letters of your university on those jackets as you committed felonies. You disgraced those letters. You disgraced the concepts of teamwork, honor, and strength those letters are meant to represent. Your athletic abilities are not licenses for brutality. They are privileges. And as of this moment, those are privileges I will personally ensure are thoroughly examined by every relevant authority at your institution." Victoria discovered a final desperate reservoir of defiance somewhere within. "You can't do anything. This is a cafe. You're not in your courtroom. This is just your word." Judge Sullivan almost smiled, a thin, icy curve of her lips. "You are correct that this is not my courtroom. However, the assault I witnessed with my own eyes is absolutely a matter for state prosecution." But she paused deliberately, allowing the word to hang ominously in the air, "as a federal judge. I am also an officer of the court anywhere within this nation's borders. The witness intimidation I am currently observing, your attempts to frighten a victim and coerce bystanders into silence, is a federal concern. The deprivation of civil rights under color of authority, which your orchestration of this attack arguably constitutes, is most definitely a federal concern." She straightened to her full height. "I am placing all three of you under citizen's arrest until law enforcement arrives. Upon their arrival, I will provide a complete sworn statement as both an eyewitness and as a federal judge. I will also be making personal telephone calls to the district attorney, the president of Fairview University, where I assume these young men hold athletic scholarships, and the executive leadership of whatever organization employs you, Miss Hastings, if you are in fact employed anywhere." With each statement, each layer of legal reality she methodically peeled back, their world disintegrated. Victoria was no longer an empress. She was a defendant. Marcus and Tyler were no longer star athletes. They were perpetrators. Their futures, their scholarships, their sports careers, their clean records, dissolving before their eyes like sugar in water. The wait for police felt like an eternity compressed into 10 excruciating minutes. Judge Sullivan took a seat at the counter, graciously accepting a cup of tea from a stunned but profoundly grateful Sophia. She sat composed and immovable, a monument to justice, sipping from a ceramic mug while the trio she'd cornered sat in petrified, absolute silence. When two uniformed police officers finally entered, the judge rose and greeted them by name. She knew them from previous court appearances. She delivered her statement with calm, forensic precision. The other cafe patrons, emboldened by her courage, stepped forward to give their testimonies. Cell phone video secretly recorded by the businessman was immediately offered as evidence. The officers listened intently, their expressions growing progressively grimmer as the full story unfolded. They handcuffed Marcus and Tyler, reading them their Miranda rights in flat, professional tones. They placed Victoria in restraints as well, her designer handbag looking absurdly incongruous dangling from her cuffed wrist. As she was escorted toward the door, she looked back at Judge Sullivan one final time, her face a canvas of utter devastation and dawning, horrifying comprehension of what she'd done. The hammer had not merely fallen. It had been dropped from a tremendous height with a full fork. Of 3.5 decades of dedication to justice behind it. In the weeks and months that followed, the consequences rippled outward like seismic waves. The district attorney, under the watchful and influential eye of Judge Sullivan, prosecuted aggressively. Victoria pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit assault, witness tampering, and several additional charges to avoid a public trial, receiving a sentence of 20 months in state prison plus substantial financial restitution to Maya. Marcus and Tyler, tried as adults due to the severity and premeditated nature of their actions, saw their full-ride scholarships revoked immediately and permanently. They pleaded guilty to felony assault and battery, receiving supervised probation, 500 hours of community service each, and permanent criminal records that no championship game could ever erase. Their names became synonymous with entitlement and shame throughout Fairview and beyond. Maya, with the pro bono legal representation from a prestigious firm that Judge Sullivan quietly recommended, filed a civil lawsuit against Victoria Hastings. The settlement she received was substantial enough to cover her entire undergraduate tuition, her graduate school ambitions, and provided a comfortable financial cushion. She didn't remain at Riverside Café. With the judge's personal encouragement and a glowing letter of recommendation, she applied to and was accepted into a competitive pre-law program. The victim had discovered her true calling in the very legal system that had protected and avenged her. The story concludes not with triumphant cheering, but with a quiet, powerful sense of justice restored. In a modern coffee shop, an everyday sanctuary of community and commerce, the law had arrived exactly when needed. It had demonstrated to everyone watching that rules do apply universally, that protection exists for those who require it, and that sometimes karma doesn't just wear authority, it wears the robe of judicial authority. Judge Sullivan offered final words of wisdom to Maya, and to anyone who would listen. The law is only as powerful as the people who believe in its promise. Be one of those people. Always. This was a story about a suit, a cafe, and the devastating power of dignity confronting degradation. It reminds us that true authority is not measured by volume, but by substance and principle. And from which corner of the world are you watching this video today? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the Bully Tales for more stories of justice served.